I graduated from my PhD last summer after around 5.5 years of quite a journey, which was preceded by a much longer journey that started with being told at the age of 4 that I was stupid, something I internalized more deeply than I could know at the time. This is the story of my educational journey, and from failing my GCSEs to graduating from Cambridge University and being awarded a PhD and surviving through deep chronic illness and developmental trauma. So back to the story. It was a humiliating experience in reception class when I coloured a lion in red and was told that I was a stupid girl, and had I ever seen a red lion? The class went silent, and I still remember the hot tears running down my cheeks and wishing that I did not exist. Feeling terrified, unsafe, intimidated and helpless, none of which I could verbalise until decades later. There was nothing I could do. I remember later thinking, but I like the colour red, and actually I don't think I had paid attention to what colour a lion is at that age. I was not read to by my parents, I did not have much interaction with the world, I don't think I'd even been to a zoo at that age. After I wrote the first draft of this piece, which was originally for an article I wrote on Substack, I was told that in English culture, the red lion is a symbol of strength, bravery and royalty. Would you believe it? It is prominently featured in the coat of arms of Scotland, where it is known as the lion rampant. A red lion standing on its hind legs symbolises strength and courage. Well, there you go. I am less speechless on this. My parents were very young migrants who were just trying to survive and not afforded the privilege of education, and also dealing with their own traumas. At the time, we did not even know that, let alone there was a word for it. I grew up in a small English market town, stuck in time with virtually no other non-white families, an odyssey of sorts. Even my name was changed to an English-sounding one, as it was too difficult and foreign for the others to pronounce, apparently. So I had two names growing up, and began hating anything to do with being brown. Apparently everything about our difference, culture, language, my mother's clothes, was disgusting and to be looked down upon and laughed at. I would be afraid to go to school alone and make that long trek across the field that was nothing short of walking into a pack of crocodiles' mouths for each day, fellow children and adult teachers. At the same time, I'd be so embarrassed and worried about being bullied because my mother's clothes were Asian, so I'd also not want her to drop me. Years went by. Lower school for me was an absolute sickening nightmare of daily bullying, including by my year 3 and 4 teachers. It felt like a prison I had no choice but to attend. I was often sick from anxiety. Again, I had no word for it at the time. I would throw up in the mornings because of the worry of having to go into a hostile environment as the only non-white kid. I would struggle to sleep and had difficulty with eating. In short, I was a terrified child, but did not know how to communicate that. One day in summer, towards the end of year 3, I was pushed off the climbing frame, but no one believed me, and I was kept in school all afternoon with a fractured wrist. My mother was pregnant with my youngest sister at the time. That day she was unable to come and collect me, and my father could not come that day either. The most hardworking man I know of, who would slave 12 plus hours a day in a factory where he, too, was treated badly and bullied for 20 years. So a relative had come. I was taken to the doctors in what felt like a longer time after the usual school time had ended, and then had to go to hospital. Finally, someone believed me. My wrist was fractured after all. The doctor, I recall, made a point of why was I kept in school all afternoon with a fractured arm. But in those days, child protection safeguarding did not seem to be a thing where I was anyway. The school did not acknowledge that I was pushed. I can never forget that whole incident, but perhaps that is a story for another time. My year 4 teacher was menacing. That is as much as I can bear to bring up about that. My already broken spirit was starting to shatter further. I was 8 years old by now. My existence felt like a prison I had no way to make sense of or get out of. I had no words to communicate it. I was unwell a lot. My migraines, according to records, began around age 4, which I am not surprised by now. Middle school was slightly less sickening a couple of years in as I grew and learned to survive despite the daily being ignored and not included in activities or play, and having my break and lunch stolen by bullies. This was distressing, especially because I most often would not eat breakfast from the anxiety in the mornings that was gut-wrenching. Days were wasted just trying to get through or in being unwell. By the time I was in my early teens, around year 9, I was offered medication, antidepressants like they were sweets, which I took for most of my developing years. until around the age of 24, when I found faith and took a God-centered approach to my life, and that was through Islam for me. I wasn't raised with that, and I will come to that later on in the narration of this story. I went cold turkey to come off the medication after around a decade. I had no idea at the time that one should never do that. I wasn't given any guidance, but I knew that it was making me sick and deteriorating my health so much being on them that it had to come out of the thick fog that it had created. It had devastating consequences that haunt me till today, though I have learned to manage and things have gotten better in other ways. I later discovered there was a black box warning on these and they should not be given to anyone under the age of 25. Sadly, I was one of those kids. I will never get justice in this life, and that was something that took me many years to come to terms with and process, especially when I was in the thick of the effects of being unwell with the physical consequences of the harms caused. One of the dangerous side effects was the medication causing suicidal feelings. Yes, I say that with a sigh. That's as much of that as I can go into. All I can say is the Almighty was looking out for me for sure. I'm still here, all praise and thanks to God. At the time, I did not know or would not have understood that. I did survive to tell the story though, as it were. So back to the academic journey. I made it to upper school, which was a bit different compared to the previous experiences, perhaps because I was now older and perhaps because there were kids from 3 different feeder schools from the local villages, so there was some change. I had a couple of supportive teachers. This made a huge difference. I actually liked going to school sometimes, at least I got used to it. I was quite delayed in my development though, as no one invested in me at school. I was just disregarded as the brown girl. In Year 9, I was of course in what was called the bottom set, students who were not seen as capable of anything and at the lowest end of educational attainment. Now I realise how awful those words are, and it's terrible that they existed, but they did. The classrooms were often chaos, with kids acting out their what I'd now call traumas. I would just think a lot and not be able to articulate or speak much. I barely read. I loved spelling though. I got way above my age for spelling in a test, which I was delighted about. My reading age was lower though. I never achieved anything else. I had no opportunity to. One day there was a helper next to me, but for another child on the other side of her who had dyslexia. She noticed I read quite quickly and was very surprised. The next thing I knew, as it was coming up to moving to Year 10, I was moved to what is known as the top set. Oh my God, what a difference of education in the same school. I could not believe it. The classrooms were not in chaos. People actually listened to the teachers. The bottom set was sheer chaos in classes. I was put in the top set for English and French. The others, like history, were mixed. All the so-called brainy kids and from good backgrounds were here. It felt really different. I didn't get bullied as such, though I was not really included either. I absolutely loved learning Macbeth. I loved English literature and history. I still sat alone mostly, and it was too late for me to do well as I was so behind. What I didn't know at the time was also, well, a number of things, but a main one. I couldn't do exams. I would just sit there frozen, unable to articulate. Needless to say, I failed my GCSEs. 2 C's and 7 D's forever etched in my mind. I'm not ashamed to say that now. I understand that it was the trauma response, it was not having been nurtured, and not everyone can do exams. People learn differently. That day outside the school, when the local newspaper was taking its annual pictures and everyone was excited, I felt like I was drowning. Is this it? What happens in this sleepy town where girls at the age of 12 are pregnant and there are no jobs? What kind of life would I live? I cried for 3 days. My little sisters were quiet. It was like a calamity and depression hit. Something in me changed. It was a monumental moment when I look back. I went to speak to the head of sixth form and asked if I could retake my GCSEs. I was told no. This was unprecedented. No one had ever retaken at the school. One had to go to the college, taking an infrequent bus for approximately 12 miles one way. At the time, the college was seen as for dropouts and people not serious. As someone who had hardly ever left the town and had the sickening anxiety I had, this was a terrifying thought and seemed impossible. I insisted. I said I would work hard and do whatever it takes. They still said no. I got told to get out. One day, from God knows where, I got the courage to walk into a Year 11 maths class. I remember standing behind that dark, heavy mahogany door, feeling nervous and not even in uniform. I opened that door. I went in, and they stopped telling me to get out and leave, and realised I was serious, making effort and determined. I still failed my maths then, but I passed enough of the others to get in to do my A-levels. I learned so much. A-level communications and psychology both taught me so much, and it was my first actual period of engaged learning. I loved the knowledge I was gaining. My school only did AS for psychology, so I now, having found some tenacity inside, applied privately to the board to take the A-level. I did not do well in the exams, but I did amazingly well, including getting an A in one of the coursework projects. I scraped through to a university place. It was a horrible experience for me, which I won't recount. I did well though, and managed to transfer to a better university and complete my degree. My undergraduate university experience was in general awful, and I was out in the world for the first time, not knowing how to navigate, but just had to. No one in my father's side had ever gotten an education. In my mother's side, no female had. All knew, and being the firstborn child of migrant parents that couldn't speak English well, put a great deal of responsibility on me growing up. Or I took that on. Towards the end of the degree, I was exploring meaning, and religion came up for me in that quest from studying psychology. I was eventually led to Islam. Psychology led me to Islam, trying to find meaning, to make sense of human behavior, losses, grief, depression, suffering, pain, and history. It was not an easy journey. I did not fit in any camp, as it were. I could not identify with the experiences of others, and they could not mine. My isolation and loneliness continued. Ironically, as one of the things I loved about Islam, that secured my commitment and devotion at the time, was the concept of the Ummah, a family, and the Ansar community, the helpers, at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. I fell in love with this and the prophetic way. How beautiful a character. Never had I experienced such kindness or beauty as detailed in the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's life. I had to embrace this and find my tribe. I had been lost all these years. I felt like an alien, a family that landed in the middle of nowhere in England. It certainly was alien. My love for Islam and a God-centered way encouraged me to read, something I had rarely done in my life until my A-levels, and then it was ad hoc. I decided to do a master's in Islamic studies and went to an institute in the UK to study. I soon found that I loved the pastoral side, so I transferred to an MA in Muslim Community Studies with chaplaincy. At the same time, I enrolled for another 2-year program studying psychodynamic counselling at another university. It was an excellent program and a solid foundation. The two together I pursued whilst working part-time to make ends meet and being more unwell than I realised. Travelling a lot and very unwell was not a great combination. Towards the end of my master's, that is if you recall back to the medication cold turkey story, I felt I must come off the medication. I stopped without having a clue what would happen. It was a nightmare. No healthcare professional had told me about the serious implications of this. My coping mechanism, distraction and focus, became my education. I put my all in. It was the only hope I had of something to anchor into. Eventually, I went on to get a distinction for my research proposal, and it was used as an example of how to write by the teachers. Two wonderful teachers, one who passed away in recent years, Dr. Atullah Siddiqui, may God have mercy on his soul. He saw something in me. Him and another tutor, they both encouraged me greatly. In the psychodynamic training, I got distinctions after distinctions for all eight modules. I could not believe it. It felt amazing. I thought, perhaps I'm not stupid after all. I just couldn't do exams, and that does not define anyone. During my studies, I was always reading about early childhood and psychology, the importance of skin contact, attachment, what happens to the developing child neurologically and physically and emotionally, and in any way I could discover where there has been neglect or trauma. My life was absorbed by gaining knowledge, both Islam and psychology. I found a lot of gaps in the practice and ideas people had and the reality through lived experience. The huge lack of understanding and the gaping hole was so apparent to me as someone who was also suffering and would feel distraught by the kinds of comments fellow Muslims would make about mental health. I could see a complete misunderstanding of human distress and psychology, and how people misappropriated it to lack of faith or God consciousness. This has changed somewhat over the last 20 years, but not hugely, sadly. I read whatever I could about nutrition, neurobiology, chronic illnesses, social and health disadvantages, attachment, intergenerational trauma, history, Islamic ideas and teachings, trying to piece things together. I would ask all sorts of questions that I could at any opportunity to any teacher or anyone I thought had knowledge. Most of the times, what I was asking was not understood, perhaps perceived as prickly or crazy or so different it seemed hard to grasp. I could not understand why at the time. I began working in chaplaincy. It was such an interesting combination of faith and counselling support. My thinking developed alongside my own self-work and discoveries around early experiences, and I started thinking about what happens in the time in the womb and even before that. I read all sorts of interesting books around fetal psychology and the unborn child. Fascinating. I was captured. Why were people not connecting the dots, I would wonder? I worked in faith schools with children who had difficulties, and the understanding was that they were just playing up or attention seeking. But I did not think this. I knew that there was a communication behind this. I've always felt that there's a communication behind whatever so-called behaviors or manifestation is coming out. Perhaps because I had my own insight based on my own experiences, and I could identify with anxiety or worries and the type of communications that young children were trying to connect with adults with over. I would ask how they were born, what circumstances into. The conversation started shifting with the staff and parents. We started piecing together a wider picture of the communication of the child. I enjoyed the work. This interest in tracing back adult experiences to the time in the womb and was one of the things that got me into Cambridge University, I believe. One day, I had a cold and was feeling miserable and browsing online. I decided to look up Cambridge University. Don't ask me why, from the background I had, it was impossible. I was bored while unwell and decided I would fill out the application form for the psychotherapy training master's program. I just wanted to be distracted from my pain and feel like I'm doing something. I applied. Shockingly, I got a call for an interview. I had never been to Cambridge, despite not living too far from it and growing up in a place that was not too far from Cambridge at all. The tutors were lovely and really interested by my thoughts and work in chaplaincy and the time in the womb as impacting later life experiences. I got in. Within a few minutes, they began talking as if I was in. I could not believe it. I came out of the building and called my friend, and she literally screamed down the phone in excitement while I stood outside the building, both smiling, excited, and in utter disbelief, unable to quite process her level of excitement or what had just happened. Nothing is plain sailing, though. I almost did not go to matriculation because I was that anxious and nervous about being in such a foreign place where I certainly did not feel I belonged. A text message from a significant figure in my life at the time prompted me to go. I went. It was absolutely amazing, and signing that, what's known as the role, was such an experience. I started the course but felt so out of place, and I was struggling with my health. At the end of the first term, when I was writing my paper on an explorative inquiry into the world of the fetus and birth trauma implications for human development, an incident occurred which damaged my spine and caused my disc to rupture. It was the most excruciating, painful situation and has left its damage to date. It took years to learn to live with the disability that came from this. I had to take a year out after my first term after making it to Cambridge. I made it back and eventually completed and graduated. Sometime later, I received an offer of a scholarship from the Aziz Foundation to do a PhD. I started at one uni, but the supervisor did not seem to understand what I was wanting to do. So I then transferred after searching for a world-leading expert in the field of birth trauma. She took me in, and eventually I had another supervisor join us. I began this whole new other journey. Lo and behold, of course there were problems, as tests seemed to be rampant. I had to have surgery a few months in. This set me back a lot, and the pain. Pain has taught me a lot, not least whilst in pain and unable to sleep. I would research all sorts of things around health, pain, psychology, suffering, trauma, the central nervous system, and so much more. And it all added up in the end to my knowledge base. Much of what I would learn was by experience that I had already lived, or helped me to find explanations or answers or ask further questions. I wanted my research, which was looking at Muslims' experiences, to be embodied in an Islamic way of knowing and doing research. This was so far away and different to where I had come from. I started to read around alternative ways of doing research and came across decolonizing research just a while before it became the in thing. This allowed me to argue for using an Islamic ontology. My supervisors were supportive and experts in their field, but the Islamic side was new to them. It was a huge struggle. I would email people all over the world asking if anyone knew of an Islamic research model alternative to usual, like IPAs and grounded theory and the likes. I also wanted to discover any Muslim female psychologists akin to the Ibn Khalduns and Razis of the world. I could not locate any work at the time. I pieced together my own approach in the end. In the process, COVID hit. My mother nearly died. I had to take a few months out again. We experienced incredible medical trauma, health issues, isolation. I lived alone during COVID. It was another level. My beloved teacher who first encouraged me passed away. My chronic illnesses and intense immobilizing back pain continued. I wondered often what the point of all this was and whether to quit. But I have such a strong tenacity that does not seem to relent even when I want to give up. Well, at least so far, it has not. Towards the end, when I was gearing up to submit, one of my supervisors said they could not support my submission because my writing was not scientific enough. I was devastated. Why now, at this point, so late in the day, was this happening? I thought I had articulated why I took the approach I did. I felt let down, and it created a temporary rupture to the relationship. I respected her a great deal and really liked her, and it was so difficult for me to process. I knew I was at breaking point as it was, and I had to submit. I could not do this anymore. In the midst of this was a terrible housing situation of over 10 people living in a one-bedroom flat, causing disruption, noise, havoc, and intrusion at all times of day and night next door. It was a daily nightmare those several months, the last leg of my PhD. I had to unexpectedly, suddenly, one day, leave my home within a couple of hours, a week before my viva for my own safety, and I had no idea where I would do my viva from. I felt broken, more than broken. There was no word for it. I had to let the uni know that I may have to find a floor space and sit somewhere, I don't even know where, to do this, and I do not know what will happen. But I managed to stay with family, and here is what happened in the final leg of my academic journey. How am I going to submit my thesis? How do I manage and make sure that this 132,000 word plus document is consistent, well written, makes sense, is robust, has everything detailed as it should? I had all sorts of worries and doubts, but I also knew that I had put my all into this in a way I had not with anything else to this level or degree. I had put blood, sweat and tears, as the saying goes, into getting here. I had laid on my back with my laptop on my knees in the most awkward positions with ice or heat to survive pain, but keep writing. I knew I could defend my thesis despite feeling hurt that my supervisor did not have confidence in my work. I decided to speak to the senior tutor for research and suggested I be allowed to go ahead and do my viva, and then whatever guidance the examiners give me, I will at least have clear direction then for what they need. We went ahead. I decided to not have any of my supervisors for the actual viva with me. The examiners understood what I did. I was able to defend my thesis, to my shock but not surprise, because I knew it would be a serious injustice if I did not pass, having been so thorough in my process. Those words, passed with minor, my absolute dream had come true. This was the best outcome I could have hoped for. I prepared myself for major, so minor was just an ecstatic dream, especially given the current and historical context. My supervisor joined for the result, and there were tears all round. There was a real understanding of the process finally. The examiner shared on Twitter these exact words: "Massive congratulations and joy to Dr. Alia Sheikh, who just defended her brilliant and courageous PhD thesis on British Muslims' experiences of pregnancy and birth. Totally honoured to be one of your examiners." End quote. What an honour for me to hear such words. To that little me who first heard I was stupid when I should have been nurtured and taught. To the me that could not catch a ball, that developed late, that was sick every day going to school for so many years. To the me that felt like a nobody. Though my value is not determined by a PhD, it means a lot to me to have survived this journey and gained a lot of experience, knowledge, and I hope wisdom. I thanked my supervisor, but she said, "The thanks is all yours." We had a moment of connection and understanding of the depth of journey that I had been on to get to here, and she was able to say to me that the reason why she why she did not support my submission was out of protectiveness, as she was worried that my work would not be understood, but she also said she learned to take risks because of her experience with me, so all's well that ends well. 2 days later, I became so sick, one of the worst illnesses of my life, which took almost a month to recover from the first phase, and so I never really got to celebrate. Plus, I sort of felt like I didn't want anyone else to feel like I was showing off, so I downplayed my achievement. It's also taken a long time to sink in. Since graduating and obtaining my doctorate, I have carried on with some speaking engagements on the topic of trauma and Muslim mental health. I have engaged in further leadership trainings and Islamic courses for my own continuing development and tried to focus down on my vision for what I would like to do. I founded the Muslim Academic Mentoring and Support Service to help others through their journey. I have also established Entropy to Serenity not just as a newsletter but also as an enterprise where I will teach courses on trauma and all that I have learned over the years, or the decades now. I have had some freelance consultancy work with universities to ensure the Muslim voice of health experiences is included, but none of this is long-term sustainable. I found it incredibly difficult to get paid work and to find people with a similar vision to invest in the kind of work I think is critical to our community. Universities are generally not interested in research around Muslims. We are in 2024, and sadly the research base in understanding Muslims' experiences is so minimal, it's deeply concerning and holds a big risk for our ongoing and future healthcare. The conversations around mental health are, in my view, outdated and deeply shaped by the language and narratives fed to us rather than us being able to unpick and unweave the impact of the colonial, secular and other isms' impact on our communities. Despite the increase in Islamic psychology which I have observed, engaged with and taken courses in over the last 20 years, I personally find approaches and conversations lacking and disjointed in many ways. While it may be a theoretical ideal, I think that on a practical level, it seems like it's a bit of a minefield, but I will write about that elsewhere and talk about that perhaps in another video. I would like to contribute, but I'm not sure yet how or where. There is a lot to be done. There is a focus on things like prayer, as there should be. I'm a big advocate for this being done in an embodied, consciously connecting way and embodying the seerah, the prophetic way, for example. But there are people who cannot connect and feel they can barely function, are so heavily traumatized, distraught and in survival mode, unable to pay their bills and suffocating without overall structure and support that an ideal Islamic systemic and structural collective communal embodiment provides. In my observation as an ummah, while we remain fractured, we cannot provide the level of healing and growth that is required for our ummah to flourish. We should also not judge or look down on those who cannot engage in Islam in the way we may think would be healing. They may need years to get there, like I did, and still do. We are all on a journey with its ups and downs. There are times when I found it so infuriating and deeply upsetting the way people spoke about Islam and my or other people's pain and suffering, but I found my own way to understanding my relationship with my Creator. My worry is for all the people that cannot afford therapy and how Islamic psychology has largely become a middle-class access barrier issue and a kind of commodification. We need new models, prophetic models, which I have ideas for, but need a tribe to help me make things happen. I have a few dreams. I'd like to establish a place of worship or a community centre. I thought of the name of Masjid Rahma many years ago, and there's an entire story behind how that came about. And it would be connected to the Rahma psychology approach that I've been developing over a decade now. The concept of the womb as Rahim, the place of creation as connected to Ar-Rahman, a beautiful nurturing space that is sensory sensitive, architecturally stunning and inspiring to the heart, body, mind and soul, a place that welcomes the broken, the sensitive, the isolated, the alone, and has a vision that goes beyond just the Muslim culture, community, and shares the message of God to all as it was intended. Another dream is also to provide a permanent waqf fund for the disabled and chronically unwell, for Muslims to tend to experience the greatest health inequalities and economic disadvantage. I'd like to start to provide this initially for Muslims because of the health inequalities and disadvantage, but then also extend it out to the wider community. I would like it to be a dignified system that embodies true welfare and care, unlike the mainstream systems which are known for treating people with the utmost disrespect, disregard, and perpetuate trauma. It would be a truly prophetic welfare system, a God-centered approach. Another dream is for the £1 million Muslim Mental Health Fund to ensure people get the holistic therapeutic care they need in a dignified, honourable manner where they have choice, and for therapists to be paid for their skills and dedication to holding the most painful yet rewarding of spaces. Another is to earn enough to provide scholarships to people from similar backgrounds or who have experienced trauma. Another dream is to establish a long-term, decades-long research department at a leading university, or independently ideally, that tackles the nuanced questions, of which there are many, we need to address as a community. I would like to create a service for those who experience medical harm and are afraid of the medical system to be able to get holistic care from medically informed practitioners where they feel safe, heard, and attended to in a way that is sensitive to the needs and supportive. There are people who would not turn to the medical system for any illness or even suicidal feelings because of the harms they've experienced. Where do people go if they are unwell or in need of medical care and don't feel safe in the current system? It's pretty scary to think about how potentially risky it is not to be able to access medical care. Tragically, lives are lost like this. I link this to the Quranic ayah, if any saves a life, it is as if he saves the lives of all of mankind. We need to care more. I'm always deeply struck by the Prophet's, peace be upon him, concern for people to the degree I recall a hadith where he said something to the effect that it is more beloved to him to walk with a person in need than seclude himself for worship for a month. This just shows how much serving others and the concept of servanthood is embedded in our tradition and is the solution to many of the modern ills. We all need to feel someone is with us. In a nutshell, what I want to achieve in the future is for more people to feel safe and connected to community through the prophetic ways of the Ummah and the Ansari helpers way. I have many dreams and ideas, so if anyone wants to help me turn them into a reality, reach out. I never expected to write this story or now be narrating this for a video, or to have written this much of the story, and I'm not sure how much will get edited out as I wrote at the time, but thank you if you took your precious time to read this or listen to this in a video format. All I can say is that I pray that God puts many blessings in your life and eases any difficulties that you have and gives you the best of the best and ultimately relief and serenity. And I will end on this. This Ramadan, I had a profound experience during the last nights. I had been unwell this Ramadan for most of it and missed many fasts and felt disconnected, though I was not in reality as I continued talking to Allah. I needed a turning point in my relationship with my Creator and the stuckness I feel in various areas of my life. I was deeply engaged in conversation, pouring my heart out and struggling physically to hold my body together from the pain, and I won't share details as it was very personal. But at the end of what felt like relief, I was in sujood and I felt suddenly like I was close to death. Sujood is like a position of like prostration position. Something in me hesitated to say like the declaration of faith, which is the Shahada, which is recommended to state when someone when someone's about to die. I don't know why I hesitated to say this for a moment, but I was in shock and I could feel myself shutting off. But I said something along the lines of, Allah, I need more time to do better, to be of value to others, to fulfill the purpose you have given me, which I constantly am trying to figure out. Not yet. Please give me time to make sense of everything and to have a better relationship with you, for your forgiveness and to seek your love. I'm still here, but it is a regular reminder that perhaps that was a warning that would I still be here in a year's time or tomorrow or in many years, who knows. But one thing is that I wish to dedicate whatever I do to bring the love of God in people's hearts, to help them in their healing, to help our community heal through understanding our individual and collective traumas, to become more emotionally regulated, healthy, and able to access our spiritual connection, which can become so clouded in pain and suffering. When we are able to become healthier, have healthier relationships, parent emotionally intelligently, and raise strong, emotionally regulated, grounded, well individuals who can go on to create healthy families and communities, we will have a healthier Ummah and community and world, and that can fulfill its purpose of establishing God-centered, Akhirah-focused, Jannah-inspired system and Jannah-inspired faith and systems and structures, so we and all of humanity can flourish and share the message and glad tidings God sent through the mercy of the world, the messenger Muhammad, peace be upon him. I request your prayers, and I pray that this inspires or touches someone out there who needs the encouragement to keep going. You never know what good may come. You are not alone. Thank you to all those who have been part of my journey, supported me, encouraged me not to give up, who have inspired me and held me together, who have kept me in their prayers and believed in me when I could not. May God bless you always with better than the human mind can imagine. May He keep us strong and united and help us add more healing to the world. Love and prayers from me to you. Thank you so much if you got to the end of listening to this video. That was a narration of an original article that I shared on my substack. Take care. God bless. Love and prayers.